Everyone, my name is Rachel Dixon. I am a massage, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm a massage therapist and a postural alignment therapist through Egoscue University. And today's class that we're doing is on better shoulder posture. And just as a little bit of a aside, I am going to be going over some exercises today, but if for some reason anything feels uncomfortable, you have any questions about whether it's safe enough for you to do the exercises, please feel free to consult with your doctor, and you can also contact me at some point to ask questions. So did everyone get the PDF that was emailed out?
Yeah.
I had drawn the exercises because since it's shared out with people and they were Egoscue exercises, I wasn't sure if they were their personal property, so I hand wrote them out and I will be demonstrating them for today. But today's class is on shoulders, and shoulders are a really common issue that people come in with, and there's more than one reason why people's shoulders might be uncomfortable, but a very common one is related to the following. So people have a movement box that they have. So how many of us, as we age and get older, we have a space around us that we typically use our shoulders for? So there's a certain cabinet that we can reach this high, and we can reach out this far, or we typically reach out this far, or we can reach down to a certain amount. When we're kids, we have a really big box. We climb trees, so we're hanging by things like this. We might see a fence, and we might go over the fence. We might crawl under the fence. We might crawl around the fence. But kids have this really big movement where the space that their arms go around them is really, really big, and as we get older, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. It is not atypical for a client to come in for a massage and they injured their shoulder because they put their suitcase in the overhead bin. That's a really, really common one because it's a bit heavy and it's over their shoulders, and that was outside their movement box. So how many of you recognize that there's probably a relative space that we typically use our shoulders? For me personally, I also have, I occasionally lift higher and go down smaller, but I spend all day long massaging, not currently, but usually, and my range of motion is really between here and here, okay? So I'm actually leaning over to a certain extent like this, but I'm spending 8-9 hours pressing in, but my range of motion really doesn't extend beyond this right here. So whether or not I introduce a lot of movement, I do a lot of repetition in a very small range of motion. When people are working on their computers or they're reading books or they're doing gardening, they often have similar limited ranges of motion. So what happens is two things. Our shoulders don't really get as much work as they're supposed to have. And also, because they're not really strong, we get injured pretty easily. So those two things happen. But one of the things that often happens is most of us get a kyphotic back because we spend so much time on computers. And because we spend so much time in a flexed position, we tend to get a little bit of the dowager's hump, or we get a really flexed upper back position. And then when we have that curved upper back, our ability of our range of motion of our shoulders gets really limited. So whereas typically, I don't actually have perfect range of motion here, but typically we would have a great deal of range of motion in our shoulders. The more that our head comes forward and our shoulders round, we start having more limited range of motion simply because of that tight, rounded back. So where there's many ways that you could look at shoulder issues, what I'm going to address today is different postural exercises that are going to reduce the rotation at the kyphotic shoulders and put the shoulders in the proper alignment, and then introduce both range of motion and exercises into the shoulder. Does anyone have any questions before we get started? Okay, all right. So there's two different ways that we're gonna have the lower legs. And you guys get to choose which one is better for you. I'm gonna show you both. And then there is multiple different things you can do for the upper body. And I'm going to show you what they look like. I'm going to describe what you might use each of them for. Some of them are more for range of motion, and some are more for gliding of the scapula, how the scapula is supposed to work over the thoracic area. And some of them are sort of contracting the muscles, sort of building up the muscles in the proper position, and some are more for movement. So the two different bottoms are going to be static back, which is our leg just up over the chair, and then static wall, which is new for you guys. So static wall is somewhat a little bit trickier. Our legs are going to be up against a wall. And depending on what works for you, they're all going to be equally good for your upper back, but they're going to have a little bit different of a focus. So the different exercises we're going to do for the upper body, and I'm going to see if I can show you right here, and then I'm going to do them on the ground. So they're going to be, okay, where are they? Oh, glides. So with the glides, okay, so you can actually do these up against a wall as well, but I'm going to be doing them against the ground, so I have gravity pushing against my upper back. So with the glides, my arms are going to be against the ground, and I am going to bring my elbows down and up. So we're going to end up having this motion that goes like this. Now this exact exercise is going to be working on how the scapula is able to move in full range of motion over our rib cage. So the reality is it's supposed to be quite stable over the rib cage, and a lot of times it gets stuck in one position. So this is really going to be working on that scapula being able to have full range of motion. Okay, so elbow curls. So elbow curls, they usually start with an active hand like this, but it's not really the end of the world, okay? I'm going to be having my hands up by my ears, okay? And then we're going to bring our elbows together and our elbows open. Now this is going to be working both the muscles of the back, but also each time you sort of open up the shoulders like this, you are working on reducing that tightness in the shoulder, or reducing the curve in the upper back. People might have trouble actually getting your elbows together, or you might have trouble getting your elbows apart. I have more trouble getting my elbows apart. Okay, so reverse presses. So reverse presses are going to look kind of funny, but in this position, but you're just resting your hands out. It's going to look like this when you're on the ground, but I'm resting my elbows out to the side, and I'm going to squeeze my shoulder blades together. And it's going to almost be that my elbows are pushing into the ground, but I'm not really going anywhere, okay? So it's like a contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation. And this one is also going to, while my body is using gravity to reduce all those rotations, I'm adding muscle work into that upper back to correct the position of my shoulders. Okay, and then reverse presses and, pullover presses. So pullover presses start with a locked elbow, okay? So my arm is very straight like this. And then I'm going to keep that elbow locked, okay? And I'm going to go from straight in front of me to up by my head, which is really going to be against the ground. So there's going to be up either range of motion where you can go back and forth with the locked elbow, and or, okay, you can go down as far as you can reach. If you have an element where you can only get your range of motion to here, okay, you could place a pillow behind you, and I forgot to bring a pillow down, but you could bring a pillow down so that it meets you where you are, and then you can have something to connect with and press into, and that's where the pullover presses come in. The pullover presses are probably going to be the trickiest for range of motion because it asks for full range of motion with your shoulders. And some of you guys might not have that right now. Over time with these exercises, you will get it though, particularly if you're correcting the alignment of your head, you are correcting the alignment of your kyphotic shoulder, and then you're adding both stability and mobility into your shoulders. Again, none of these should hurt. If they do hurt, please stop. If you have an injury, feel free to ask me some questions, okay? None of these are supposed to hurt. They are supposed to be effective, and you don't have to use all of them. If you were coming to me as a client, I would have probably given you one or two that would have been the most effective for you. But you will probably find out pretty quickly which ones are helping you and which ones are not seeming to help you as much, okay? Usually, if they're a little bit challenging or you feel that your body is working muscularly, they're more helpful to you. Any questions to start with? Okay, so hopefully you will see me. I'm going to go show you what the lower half looks like. And then I'm going to do the exercises on the ground so you can see me doing them in those positions, okay? If you can't see me, feel free to yell. Just gonna make sure. Okay. All right, so first I'm gonna start with static wall because we have done static back before, okay? So with static wall, we're going to be getting as close to the wall as we can. And to get our legs up the wall, I'm actually going to start with my bottom as close to the wall as I can, okay? And then I'm going to scoop over, and I'm going to scoop up as close to the wall as I can. So what I really want is to be as close as I can that my hips are still on the ground. If you were so tight in this position that your hips are hanging up in the air a little bit, you need to scoot back so that both hips can sit on the ground. So for now, I'm going to relax my upper body, but I'm going to bring some activity into my legs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my legs for me, nice and square. I want my feet flat, relatively flat. And then I'm going to contract my quads. And already, this is a lot of a stretch on my back line, and my upper body is relaxed. But now, I'm going to do the upper body exercises on top of the static wall. So the pullover presses, I have a locked arm, and I'm going to press into the ground. Now, if I could not reach all the way down to the ground right here, I could put a pillow here that I could. So if my range of motion only went to here, okay, I could get a pillow that would meet me here and I could press into it. And then over time, I could reduce that pillow so I can get all the way down to the ground. So reverse presses is here. My arms are on the side, okay? I kind of look like a football, whatever that thing is called, goalpost. And then I'm going to squeeze my shoulder blades together. I'm going to be slightly pressing my elbows into the ground, but I'm not actually going anywhere. But there is muscle activity between my shoulder blades as I am working. Now this right here is shoulder glides. I am now having to rotate my hands. They are on the ground, and I want to keep them in the range of motion that my hands are able to stay on the ground. So now I'm going to glide them down, my elbows as close to my body as I can without kind of arching my back. Like I'm almost getting too far right here. My back is starting to arch. And then I'm going to bring them up by my head. So my arms are going to stay at this angle like this, but I'm going to bring them here. And this one is about asking my back to stay in one position when my shoulder blade is sliding on each other, okay? And then elbow curls. They've got that active hand right here, and I'm going to bring my elbows together and my elbows apart. I'm going to like press into the ground for a couple of seconds, and then bring them together and bring them apart. And bring them together and bring them apart. And I think that was all the exercises that I had. But now let me show you to get out of it, I'm going to roll onto my side, and I'm going to press myself up, okay? But let me show you what it might look like with static back. So with static back, let me see, yeah. We're going to come here. I'm going to, now this, why you might choose static back over static wall is if that was too tight, if you pull forward or you have more rotation at your hips, you're going to make a bigger difference with static back. If you had a rounded upper shoulders, the static wall is going to put more pressure on your upper back than your lower back. Okay, so now I'm resting with my legs in static back, and I don't have quite enough space for some of these. I'm going to do the presses like this. I'm going to do the reverse presses. I'm going to do the glides. And I'm going to do the elbow presses. Now, one other way that you could do them if getting down to the ground wasn't good for you, is you can do them up against the wall, because the wall is going to be a solid surface for you to be around, okay? So you could also stand up against the wall. You want your feet pointing forwards. You want your legs about hip width apart, and you can do the same. You would be against a stacked surface, and you could do the same arm glides. You could do the same elbow curls. You could do reverse presses. A little tricky because you tend to push yourself forward. And you could do, well, I can't do these right there. But if you have the ability to get down to the ground to do your exercises, then gravity is working with you. Any questions on addressing that tight rounded back and increasing range of motion with different exercises?
I have a question.
Yes.
So all of these exercises you can either do with a static back or static wall. It doesn't really, like what's the difference?
You can, so the difference is static wall is more of a stretch to your back line. Not everyone can do it very effectively. Try getting into static wall and seeing how much of a stretch you have on your back side. So in static wall, you're also pulling your feet forwards and you're also contracting your quads.
Mm-hmm. Rachel, I can't hear you.
I lost it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
No.
Hear me?
I can't.
Okay, sorry, I lost internet there for a second. So if I had a client with a really rounded upper back, okay, that could get into the static wall position, I would have them do that one, okay? If they had a big hip disparity, if they had an anterior pelvis, you're going to get more work on the anterior pelvis in the static back. So I might choose that one, okay? But mostly it's harder to get into the static wall, so I might or might not give it according to that one.
Okay.
Rachel, I have a question about a disparity on my left and right, because I've been working with a left shoulder injury for several months, so that my left upper arm is so tight that, you know, to do those exercises, my left arm is just like frozen. I've been working on it, but it's not loosening up at all.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect that the source of it was a shoulder injury.
Mm-hmm. Well, frozen shoulder is a little bit different, if that's what you're referring to. Do you think it's a frozen shoulder?
You know, I went and did physical therapy in January and February. They didn't call it frozen shoulder. And so I've been doing certain exercises, but it doesn't seem to really improve.
So there's a lot that I could say about frozen shoulder and limitations, but over time, it just takes a little bit longer. It almost always takes between 6 months and a year, no matter what you do. There are ways that you could reduce adhesions. Massaging typically into this area and massaging around different things would probably help as well. Most likely, if you could spend time in the static back and the static wall.
Well,
Rachel, we lost you again.
okay. Oh, I lose you.
We can't hear it. We can't hear it.
Lining your shoulders and your hips on top of each other. Can you guys hear me?
No.
Okay. Sorry, because I keep losing internet a little bit. It's going to improve your shoulders somewhat. It does take a really long time, and you're welcome to contact me and ask me, further questions, because right now you're not even coming up in the pictures, so I don't get a sense of seeing what's going on either. Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I have a question. So if person has a frozen shoulder, is those exercises safe to do?
None of them should be unsafe to do, but frozen shoulder typically has a lot of pain and different, it has a lot more discomfort. So
I guess my question, should they try to push through the pain, or it's better to avoid doing it?
I don't tend to tell people to push through the pain. I let them go to PT and push through the pain, and then I work through it. And I would typically, if I saw someone, I personally would have done trigger point work as well. A lot of times releasing the subscapularis under the muscles and then doing some work is going to be more effective. But it's tricky. A lot of people with frozen shoulder, that stuff builds up really fast. It takes a period of time, whether you have PT or no PT, it takes a period of time, and you've actually built up junk in the shoulder capsule. When people have frozen shoulder, usually I see where they are, and I talk to them about what even doctors might do. So it's a little bit trickier, but for the most part, if you get your body in the right position and then you build up stability, it does tend to help with people. But the gliding is where people have a hard time typically with a frozen shoulder, because your shoulder joint does a couple of different things. There's an element where your arm is down here. Actually, it doesn't have to be the glide even, but your arm comes up here and it gets to about here, okay? And then there's an element where something drops into the shoulder joint, and then I have the space to come up into here, okay? When someone has a frozen shoulder, they've lost really the ability for that second part to happen where it sinks in and then they move up. So the reality is you literally have junk in there that has to break up. And a lot of times doctors' options will be very different, but I could create one for potential frozen shoulders if you guys want, but slowly and within comfort, adding an element of getting that shoulder blade to glide on a stacked body will tend to be very helpful for people.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I think what confused me was there's so much pain and restriction in the arm that one tends to think that the problem is in the arm, but apparently it's not. It's in the shoulder, correct?
Well, I don't know exactly what is going on with you. So that's tricky. But many times the issue, people can have an issue coming from the neck. They could have an issue where it depends a little bit if it's muscle or nerve, okay? But you can have an issue coming from the neck. You can have an issue coming here from between the clavicle. You can have an issue right here at the shoulder joint. And then you can have issues further down. A lot of times though, okay, creating more stability at your shoulder and proper range of motion will help things downstream.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one. Can you just review the 4 exercises? I got the one overhand, I got this glide, I got the crunch of the elbows, and then there's one more, which I think I missed.
Did you get that? Okay, so it was the glides.
Yeah, got
then
that.
It was the elbow curls.
Yeah.
And I sort of wrote them down. And then there were the reverse presses, which is like I'm against the ground and I'm just squeezing my shoulder blades together like this.
Oh, okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's the pullover presses.
Right. Okay.
Like this, or the pullover and or the pullover presses. I hand wrote them in something that looked like this, but Egoscue is Egoscue is the company that I had my postural alignment with. If you look up Egoscue and any of those names, Egoscue, static wall, reverse presses, or actually the static wall, they don't have as many. If you even look up the static back reverse presses, you will find a little video clip with each of those. In the little form that I had on this page, I added a couple of other things that you guys might find really helpful. One, so I'm certified through Egoscue. I've had a lot of other different postural people that I have studied over the years, and I know our time is pretty much up. But Katie Bowman, both of these books are listed in the thing. I don't know if the library has them, but Katie Bowman is a PhD movement specialist, and she has a lot of great little pieces of information. She has blog posts and she has books that are great, okay? In the Move Your DNA, they have a section on increasing your strength and range of motion in your arms, okay? It's really nice because we don't use them enough, so she has a really great system of kind of like increasing both of those that can be done in a pretty safe way. She also has a great book called Dynamic Aging, and most people don't realize they have issues with movement until it's harder to get it back. It's easier to just never lose it. So it's a really great book of if you already are on the older side, that it might be helpful to you. With a lot of people, that's a different age. You might be a relatively young and mobile 80-year-old, and you could be 43 and barely be able to move, okay? So Dynamic Aging has some great sections for it, including ways of being able to move your neck and your body to be able to drive better. Things that are really relative to people as they age, okay?
Oh, great, thank you.
So I have a couple of my favorite blog posts, plus ways that you can connect with me if you have any questions. Because I'm certified in Egoscue, but I tend to follow quite a few other people that I add their education in with my stuff. Anyone have any more questions?
I have one question, which maybe I need to talk with you directly, but with this time off, I've had a lot of time to be raking the yard, and I'm aware that I'm working with one side of my body, and I'm trying to rake with the other arms, and I'm just not successful. Is there a way to counteract that dominant motion?
Well, for the most part, when it comes to shoulder, we have a dominant twist. Okay, so I can't remember if you were at the class, but the class so you most likely are you like when you're raking, are you raking with the top hand on your right?
Yes.
Okay, so your top hand on your right, so you are most likely rotated like this a little bit. Would that make sense? No. Would that make sense? Or is it left?
The movement is to the right, upper hand on the rake.
Okay.
But to the right.
Okay.
Right.
So you're most likely twisting like this, okay? So we want to add elements where you're looking to twist to the left. If you are having shoulder issues, rolling patterns are probably difficult for you, but I think we had done twisting. If you were to add elements, so if you're normally twisting like this, okay, we want to add elements where you're twisting like this into your day, okay? So that same one where we had been sitting and we had been bringing our hands this way and looking this way, and sort of introduce other movements to the other side. As much as possible, if you can do things both sides, it's more helpful, but it's not always practical. A lot of people with gardening will also find out that I can do it for a certain amount of time, and when I press it before it's like longer, it's too much. So learning what works well for you tends to be the most helpful thing.
Okay. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks a lot. And thanks for the handouts. They're great.
Yeah, good. Any other questions before we go? Oh, one thing I wanted to say was the body works as a unit. So today I called it shoulder posture, but it really, really helps with necks as well. But now on Wednesday, I believe I'm going to do a neck class. And there's all sorts of different ways. So when each one does different things, it's going to help more than one part of the body. I may also teach a class on thoracic rotation, which is what I sort of brought up. You sort of rotate with raking to one side, but how do we introduce the opposite, to equal thoracic rotation? And that one would also address shoulders. So, next week is going to be next, but perhaps we could do a thoracic rotation class as well.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent.
all right. Well, if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, I will see you guys next Wednesday. So,
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
thanks.
Thank you.
All right. See you later.